Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Studio Chatter podcast. I'm Craig Reeves, and today I am very fortunate. You are also very fortunate to have with us as a guest the lovely and talented Jett Galindo. She is an extraordinary mastering engineer. She worked with Keely Bumford, aka Dresage. She mastered her album, Terror Nights and Terror Days. She's also worked with Avant. She's done mastering for the La La Land soundtrack, and she also did mastering for Arcane League of Legends. It's really great to have you here. How are you?
Hey, Craig, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. It's such a great weather. I love gloomy days in LA.
You're the first mastering engineer that we've had on this show. So
it's an honor.
It's really cool. So have a lot of questions. And I'm sure that a lot of the listeners are going to be curious about a lot of things about mastering and about what you do.
Let's get into it.
I'm going to put you on the spot. So in your own words, what is mastering?
I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. Mastering sounds like a very just clinical, technical stage in music production, but there's a lot of creativity that goes into it. And a very simple way that we like to describe what mastering does is in the analogy of food, for example. So like in music production, there are three main stages. So the first one is recording. So when it comes to making a dish, it's gathering all the ingredients in your meal. So with recording, you want to make sure that all the necessary instruments are recorded, all the layers of vocal tracks and effects have to be gathered. So that's when the recording stage happens. And then the second main stage is mixing. So now that you have all these ingredients, you want to make sure that they all blend together in the right measurement and the right time that it comes into the dish. And so a lot of that balancing and effects and making sure that all these individual instruments and layers of sound all blend together in harmony so that rather than you're hearing all these individual sounds, it all comes together into experiencing one song, one music. Now mastering, this is where once you've gotten all your dish together, it's time to put it in the oven, make sure that it bakes, and then it gets presented in the right way possible. So it's like presentation, garnish, and then all that. So I hope that's an easy way to explain what we do. Mastering is making sure that whatever's been created in the songwriting, production, and mixing stage and the product that comes out of all that hard work gets translated and you get to hear it the best possible way, no matter what listening experience, format, or streaming platform you're using, whether you're listening to the music from a phone or from a Bluetooth speaker. You want to make sure that music is mastered in a way that your music is best expressed and experienced in its best potential. And it's not just about numbers, it's not just about looking at meters, but there's a lot of creativity that happens to it too. And that's where all the fun stuff happens. So yeah, and it's a very fast-paced stage. That's mastering.
Very, very, very good discussion on that topic. I mean, that was one of the best explanations I've ever heard.
We try.
Yeah, the analogy to cooking makes a lot of sense because and it's funny because the mastering studio that you work at is called the bakery.
I was going to say, and it's funny because my mentor, Doug Sachs, who's considered the grandfather of mastering when he opened the mastering lab in 1967, he always loved describing music in the way of food. You know, it's like when you're listening to music on a vinyl record, it's like a fine dining experience where like the whole ritual of getting your vinyl record out of the jacket and putting it on the turntable, part of that ritual of consuming the music is part of enjoying the music. So that's kind of like fine dining. But when you're downloading like a pirated lossy MP3 on the internet, that's kind of like fast food in a way, but music is still consumed. So that food is such a great analogy for music.
It really is. You're kind of making me hungry.
Sorry, me too.
How important do you think mastering is to the process? I mean, obviously you're going to have a bias as a mastering engineer, but like, how important do you think it is?
it's good to mention that bias, but thankfully I come from a background where no musician and producer really had access to a mastering facility or mastering engineer. So in the Philippines, where I grew up and was raised until I moved here to the US in 2009 to pursue formal audio engineering studies, in the Philippines you're expected to do everything on your own as the engineer. So you record, you mix, and you master as well. And I was fortunate enough to be trained in by a mentor back in the Philippines that taught me how to properly master music. But mastering is important, because even if you're doing the mastering yourself, setting that as a separate stage in your production process lets you be more creative in the whole music production experience without having to worry about the limited headroom of commercial music marketplace. Because and the thing is, every musician will have a different workflow, and it's perfectly fine. There are a lot of electronic producers that I know that mix and master as they write their music. And the mastering, like that cooked, saturated, compressed sound becomes part of the music, and that's great. There's no rule against that. But if you're not worrying about that distortion and clipping that happens by having to make sure that your music is loud as you're going through your whole production process, you get to focus more on just making music.
Yeah.
And once you finalize the music, you can now get into the mastering stage and just listen to your music as in a big picture objective perspective, and make sure to like just focus on loudness and making sure your music translates to different playback systems. So the good thing about mastering is that you're training your ears and yourself to approach your music on a new perspective that you've never really gone in when you were like deep into all the individual elements of the music while you're recording and mixing. Because in mastering, rather than looking at all the small details, you're now approaching your music as just one entity, like a big picture third person perspective. And you want that neutral perspective when you want to make sure that no corner is left, no stone is left unturned when you're ensuring the quality of your music before it gets released.
Yeah. I mean, for me as a producer and as an engineer, a lot of the times I want to send the music to somebody who specializes in mastering because I have heard it so often. Like I've heard the music so much. I'm so close to the project that I'm not going to really know what it needs.
Exactly.
A lot of the times there's an outside perspective that's needed. And a lot of the benefit of having somebody else, obviously the big one is you have somebody who literally specializes in mastering, working on it.
That's very true.
But I think the even bigger aspect is just another set of ears that hasn't heard it.
You absolutely nailed it. And I agree wholeheartedly. And music is such a collaborative experience, even just the homemaking of it, that having that last stage really done by an expert is something that everyone highly recommends. Like Al Schmidt, who's rest in peace, he passed away just I believe a few months ago. Even he has won the most number of Grammys, but he still always had Doug Sax master his music. But the point is, having someone who was not involved in that in-depth production and mixing process approach your music from a very fresh perspective with fresh set of ears, and make sure, and also take note that this is an expert who's used to listening to music in a very critical level. So all of that small adjustments that have to be done in less than half a dB steps. So having someone work on your music who's attuned to that critical level of listening in a listening environment that's perfectly tuned for critical mastering adjustments, that is such a huge difference to that can really help your music take it to the finish line. And I always like when clients attend our mastering session, because then they get to hear the before and after mastering. Because the point is that the music is still your music. It's more about just enhancing your music rather than changing it. So the experience of before and after gets really exciting when they get to hear it themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Al Schmidt, man, what a legend. He passed away, I believe, earlier this year, I believe.
Yeah, I think
like
so.
Not long. Yeah, I think he was like 90.
Yeah,
absolute
92
legend.
or something. But
yeah, he was old.
He lived his best life, and that's all we strive for, is to like be able to reach that age and just do what we love, right?
I know. I have a theory about mastering, and I'm going to tell you what it is, and you tell me how you feel about it.
Okay.
I believe that mastering is important because everybody else is doing it. Think about it. Okay, let me explain why I think that.
This is philosophical.
Well, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have let's just think of like Formula One. All right. Now I know the Formula One season just ended, and my boy
I heard
Lewis
it was
Hamilton.
intense.
Yeah, my boy Lewis Hamilton didn't get it, but here's the
I heard
thing.
like a lot of like intense stories about that. But like props to Lewis.
Yeah.
And I know Formula One.
yeah. So if you think about Formula One, if there is some aerodynamic advantage that one team has, well, they're going to be beating everybody because it's such a close competition, right? It's a game of milliseconds. It really is. And if you can shave just a tenth of a second off of lap times with some aero package that you have, well, everybody else now has to get that aero package or whatever that is to be able to compete. So if one artist, like if Dua Lipa is getting Chris Geringer to master her music and then nobody else is getting their music mastered, guess what's going to happen? Dua Lipa is going to be lapping everybody because the producers today really are all good, right? The mixers today are all good, okay? Mm-hmm. At least on the high levels, like the major level, okay? And so if there's one engineer that can go to somebody like you and get their stuff sounding even better, they're going to be lapping the entire field. So now everybody is going to have to get their music mastered just to be able to keep up.
This is interesting. Yeah. I think the fact that music has gotten much more accessible, the whole production process has become much more democratic and accessible to everyone, no matter, like, heck, even the fact that a Record of the Year album was recorded in a bedroom, talking about Billie Eilish, it's become accessible to a bigger audience of creators. And that is such an amazing thing about today's technology, just making music so much more expansive. But then because of that, you have to make sure that no matter what background you're from, you're getting that shit mastered perfectly, because everyone's going to have all these access to production tools, but you're still going to have to release that in the commercial marketplace where you're going to be heard next to Dua Lipa. So mastering is a great equalizer in that sense.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's a really good perspective, Craig.
Dude, I remember the first time that I got my music mastered by a professional.
How did that feel?
Oh my gosh. And the first person that I ever got my music mastered by was Randy Merrill, who's like a multi-time Grammy Award winner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was the very first person that I got my music professionally mastered by. And I remember hearing it. I was like, man, no wonder why everybody's stuff sounded so much better than mine. This was a few years ago. And
wow.
Yeah.
I gotta hear your music, Craig. That's amazing.
Yes, of course. I mean, I will definitely send some music to you because I got a lot of material and you're going to be getting a couple of tracks of mine to master and work on.
Oh, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, because there was a track that I sent to, I'm sure, a colleague of yours. She's another great female mastering engineer, Piper Payne.
Oh, Piper!
Yeah,
She's
Piper
awesome.
Payne.
She's
Yeah, she's
cool.
great. She mastered a track of mine, just did a phenomenal job, a
Nice.
stupendous job, one of the best mastering jobs I've gotten. And I'm going to get you to
Oh, damn.
master.
You should tell her that.
I'm gonna get you to master some stuff because I was telling Keely, who is a dear sister of mine and somebody who I really admire, and
Same.
somebody who you did a great mastering job
Oh, thank
for
you.
on her EP, Terror Nights and Terror Days. Also, the acoustic version you mastered. And I was telling her that Jett Galindo killed it on the mastering because I played it on my brand new monitor set. Well, it wasn't like a new set of monitors, but I got a sub for my set of monitors, and I listened to the entire EP on my set of like my new monitor set, and it sounded amazing. It sounded so good.
Oh,
And so
great to
I
hear,
just want to
man.
hand that to you.
Oh, thank
What
you,
was it
Craig.
like? What was it like working with Dresage?
Oh, man.
What a talent, right?
Right. And I was telling you a while ago that I am just a fangirl of people like Keely, like Dresage, and the honor of working on her music. It's just like I am an engineer first and foremost, and I grew up just being a big music lover. I know that I'm an engineer through and through and not a songwriter producer. So to be working with people like Keely, who just creates all these amazing sounds and layers, and being part of bringing that music to life is just such a fulfilling. It's like I could have a shitty day, but then I just sit in the studio and work on her music. It's like a complete 180. I just feel like I'm living my best life working on music such as hers. And the great thing about working with Dresage is just the whole collaboration process. Like the thing with mastering, and a lot of people should learn, is that we don't just instantly churn out the mastered product. We don't clients should not expect that we just like sprinkle fairy dust and call it a day. Like we get to the final sound because of the artistic vision of the client. And like just working with Keely and understanding her vision and her like communicating with me on the direction she's going for, it makes it so satisfying for me because once we nail it, it's there. Yeah, it's and I also love the whole process of like waiting for the music to come out, because the great thing about mastering is that you end up being intimately familiar with the artist's music before it comes out. Not so that when it comes out, you kind of like know the music already, and it's like you're vibing with everyone, and like seeing and then Keely's work is just so well rounded that it's the music is like the essential part, but there's so many things that come along with the package: the artwork, the music video, the live streams. It's really exciting. It's very satisfying to work with Dresage.
Yeah, and you couldn't ask for a nicer person. Just an absolute sweetheart.
Just Keely and Mark. Mark Cadley is also another amazing producer.
I've never met him, but she mentions him quite a bit. They had a project, More Giraffes. Yeah,
I'm.
Which you also mastered, by the way.
Yes, I did. I just love. The great thing about mastering is you get to be exposed to so many genres. You're not just, if you're a music lover and you're not attached to one genre, then mastering is like the best job, because like I come from a classical background, but it's strange because my parents are rock musicians.
Oh, wow.
They manage and teach cover bands in the Philippines, and that's the life I was exposed to. So it's kind of, I guess, a rebellion for me to get into classical music. But that whole experience of just working with people like Keely is just so satisfying. Like electronic music, just mastering electronic music that's always the highlight of my day. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what tips would you give to somebody who is looking to get their music mastered by like a professional? Like what tips would you give them to prepare their mixes?
So definitely this advice is going to be for the listener, because you seem to have a lot of experience working with mastering engineers, Craig. I'm like really impressed. But every mastering engineer will have different spec requests. But you are going to be well on your way to delivering your music for mastering if you deliver your music in the native sample rate that it was mixed at. So, for example, you mix your music at 48K. So export it in 48K, don't downsample or upsample. And to make sure that at least your bit depth is at least 24-bit. Don't send in a truncated or dithered 16-bit wave file. It still happens to us pretty often. But in terms of like delivering your music, especially for like hard-hitting genres like electronic or pop, there are going to be a lot of producers who have two-bus processing on their master chain. And the biggest thing that you see on the internet is like the instruction of like bypassing your limiter so that you send your mix with the headroom.
Yeah.
So making sure that you leave headroom for your mastering engineer. So our mastering studio,
about how many dBs of headroom do you usually?
I was going to get there. So our mastering studio does not dictate a specific number. And so we don't impose a particular value when it comes to headroom. And the thing is, it doesn't always apply for certain music where we work off of the version that's non-limited, and there's a reason for this. There are certain styles of music where as it was being produced, the two-bus processing of the master chain becomes like an integral part of the overall sound. And when you ask the artist to bypass that two-bus processing, their mix just doesn't come together anymore. It's like it falls apart. That's why there are certain times when we receive both the limited version that they've been listening to, and then we also receive the non-limited version with all that headroom. It sounds very different. So I'm not fond of the situation where I have to chase that sound of the limited version before I can master. Like we want to make sure that we master from the mix that has been approved and is what you're listening to. And sometimes, like, bypassing all your master processing, your mix ends up collapsing. So depending on the music, I might ask for a less limited version rather than a non-limited version, you know? So rather than having your mix collapse, just give us a bit of like breathing room on your mix. However, there are cases where we actually receive mixes from established mixers and they don't have any headroom left for us. Like they just have it like limited and maximized on their end. And that doesn't stop us from getting our job done. So we can still master off of the mix that's already like full headroom. And our job at that point is to just make sure that we can enhance the 2% that we can provide to the master. So it really depends on the music. But yeah, if you feel that you've been producing and mixing your music with your two-bus processing, see how it feels if you bypass that. And if your music really collapses and it changes, then send your mix with just a less of a limiting rather than bypassing it entirely. But then again, it really depends on every mastering studio. But you can't go wrong with, as long as you deliver your music in its native sample rate and at the bit depth of at least 24-bit, your mastering engineer will be able to do their job. And as for one thing that you can't also take for granted when you're working with a mastering engineer is to be open-minded and to share your vision to the mastering engineer. Like there are cases where the client just says, do your thing. and we just do our thing. And it happens a lot with clients.
Do you prefer those over people being specific?
I would love, especially if it's a new client, I would love to hear their vision. Like, I would prefer it if it's like concise, but over like a novel, like 1,000-page email.
But honestly, I have to say that a lot of the times, like when I'm working with a mastering engineer, I usually don't really leave any, because a lot of times I just want them to like not mess it up. You know what I mean? And sometimes I like seeing what the mastering engineer feels is needed, because it's like I'm so close to the project that a lot of times I don't even know what it needs. And so a lot of times I'm like, look, I have been so close to this project. It sounds great to me. So whatever you think is needed, go ahead and do it. And if I don't like it, I'll let you know. So,
yeah. I mean, even an email with that thing you just said will already help a lot. Like just telling the engineer saying, I love my mix how it is right now. I'm not sure what it needs, but I feel like it needs something. Do your thing. Like that already helps me a lot. But I always get a lot of mixes with sometimes I don't even know the artist. I don't know the title. And
or the country.
Or the country. That's the great part about mastering, is we get to like, on the morning, you're going to work on a Japan jazz album, and then at night, it's going to be like an electronic hybrid from India. Oh gosh, you have to check out like electronic music from India. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I'm going to send you I'll connect her with you too.
There's a producer that used to come in on my Twitch stream named Vild, and he was amazing. He was an electronic producer from India. Ooh. Yeah, they get down in India with the electronic music.
So I'll send you like links, but I'm a big fan of Shilpa Ananth and Kanika Patawari. I'll send it to you. But I'm gonna check out your Twitch streams too. But like you don't really, there are times when we have no clue, no information about the music at all, and we are equipped with the capability to really just do our best and really approach the music in a way that we feel would serve music the best possible way. And it works out. There are times when the client realizes that, oh, actually, this is what I think. Like they only start to like realize the direction they're going for after hearing the first mastering pass, and that's fine. Like there is no like rule. It's more about just being open to collaborating.
There have definitely been times where I wanted to change something in my mix after hearing the mastered version. Like that's happened a bunch of times. It's like, okay, can I get a revision on this master? Not because you did anything wrong, but because I did something wrong.
And that's the perfect scenario, is a client who's just who communicates with us. Like the last thing I want the client to feel is that they can't tell me what they feel like. If like I think it would be a failure on our part if the client just says, okay, thank you, bye. Like or we don't hear back from them. It's like, I would want them to feel comfortable to tell me their vision. And I wouldn't want them to feel like they're wasting my time. Just hearing from the client is always helpful.
Nice. How often is it that you have to tell a client, hey, listen, man, you need to fix this mix. Like this mix is not good, or you need to make improvements to the mix. Like, are there times where you are honest with the client and say, look, I mean, this is what you're looking for, but the mix, you need to improve it in order to get there?
Actually, that happened recently, and it really you only really get to that point if you've achieved this level of like mutual respect and understanding with the client, and then have them know that you have their best interest at heart all the time as the mastering engineer. And like there was this situation where it's an amazing like folk electronic fusion artist from Nashville, and it sounds amazing, but then as they worked on their music, they didn't realize that when you sum the mix to mono, only the drums and the vocals are left. Like everything is so out of phase, and like some people don't realize that their music becomes out of phase, and it's like I had to let them know. So yeah, that happens. I recently asked the artist if they can send me a version of their music that's less limited, because they sent me a fully limited, hard-hitting R&B record, which is fine. I can still master off of that, but the kicks are all distorted. And the thing is, it's fine for them. They approved it. But I feel that if I master off of this one, we're just going to exacerbate the sound of that distortion. So I would prefer just backing off a bit on the heat in that mix, and then we're going to let it sing. And yep, that's definitely what needed. So yeah, if I ever told the client or the artist that something needs to be adjusted, it's really out of just being on their side and gaining their trust that whatever we're asking them is really to serve the music the best possible way.
Does that happen with major label stuff often too? Like how often does it happen with like a major label project and it's like, oh, this mix is bad?
At that point, because it's a major label project, there's many steps to get to the point that we receive it. So it's very rare that we deal with those scenarios. However, I did communicate with a record label from the Philippines about one song being out of phase, and it's a totally different project. But yeah, it's like, and the thing is, you build that relationship with the A&R, with the artist, and they know that you got their back. Another thing that we like to do, if there's like an error on the mix and it's something that's completely by accident from the mixer, we go straight to the mixer and not let the artist or label know. Because
you want to communicate with the engineer, not the.
We want to make sure that it's like we're making the engineer look good, and you end up like building trust off of that one too. It's like you don't want to cause any unnecessary like stress by involving more people in a simple back and forth between the engineer.
Yeah. So if you're getting something from Sony or Warner, it's like, okay, this mix is going to be pretty dialed in most of the time. Like if it's a major engineer, like if it's a big name person, it's like, okay, this is going to be easy. This is easy mode, right?
And if anything, like even labels make mistakes. A lot of the mistakes that we encounter is with metadata. Just sometimes like a lot of times we end up like receiving the metadata with the label copy with all the information about the project at the very end. So it kind of like delays the whole process. Sometimes it's like they want us to master alternative versions of the mix, so instrumental, TV, a cappella, but then we don't have that source. Can you send it over, please? So it happens. And the funny thing about working with labels is you end up like communicating with 10 people in one email, and it's just too many chefs in the kitchen, but it works. Like if you've worked with them for so long, it just works somehow.
Yeah. Has there ever been a case where you got a song and you were like, I can't do anything to make this sound better. It already sounds perfect. It's like, it's like, I just can't improve on this. Like, it's already there. Like, has that ever happened?
That's the, it happens with like, when I was working with my mentor, Doug Sachs, and he works with a lot of like top projects, and even like independent clients who hire him to master their music. And there are times when it's it's already perfectly engineered that besides adding level, like adding gain, he doesn't touch anything. He still gets paid the big bucks, but they pay for his ear's seal of approval. Yep. And it takes
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, exactly. You're paying for the mastering engineers quality check, thumbs up, to ensure that this is ready for commercial distribution. But
that happened to me once, actually.
nice.
There was a track that I did with an artist not long ago, and I sent it to Greg Calby to have a master.
and
he just said,
many mastering engineers.
He was like, all I did was just turn it up and maybe put like one little thing on it because it was already perfect. I was like, great.
No, actually, the reason why
that kind of makes me feel good about myself. I didn't mix it myself, but I mean, it was like, oh, great.
Nice. No, that's how you measure if a mastering engineer is good. If something doesn't need anything, they don't. It's like, it takes a lot of humility to get to that point, and it's not about ego. It's like, if it sounds great, you don't fucking change it. It's like, and that takes a lot of discipline, and there are cases where and the thing is, that is a very common scenario in a mastering studio, to add level, add a bit of like half a dB at 10K, and that's the perfect adjustment for that particular song. That's very much a perfect mastering scenario right there. If you find that the mastering engineer is like throwing everything in the kitchen sink in the session, then that's not really going to be good for the music. But yeah, it takes a lot of humility to really be minimalist in the mastering world.
I guess some mastering engineers would be like, well, I mean, I want the client to feel like they got their money's worth, so I got to do something to it.
You know what? However, speaking of that, the one thing that mastering engineers really do a great job at, that tends to be hardly done outside of that scenario, is bringing the level up and making sure that, like, it's easier said than done. Making shit loud is not easy, and
it's
making
a black
sure
art.
It I guess it is everyone likes to call it black art, but there's a lot that happens because you're of restraint. Sometimes it's this restraint that really brings the best out of music. And yeah, it's like making something loud while making sure that all the small details don't get compromised is the money maker in mastering. So so it's not about changing the production, because it's already been approved in the first place before it got to the mastering stage. It's making sure that whatever has been made before mastering gets translated in the world of commercial streaming and the commercial marketplace, where things have a limited headroom. So that's the challenge. That's why you pay Greg Calby and Randy Merrill the big bucks, because they're really good at that.
And well, I'm going to pay you.
Let's do this shit.
You're gonna master some stuff of mine.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, after hearing that stuff you did for Keely, it's like,
oh shit! Now the pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure's on.
I mean, like the pressure after Piper Payne. God. Well, if you ever see Piper Payne again, please tell her I say hi, and I also tell her I say hi if I catch her first. But she's
dude.
Cool.
If I can get Piper Payne on this show, that'll be great. I haven't asked her. I'm going to though.
She's busy. So, it's gonna be hard to track her down.
It's gonna be hard because she is very busy.
Yeah, it won't be. It won't hurt to ask her. Like sometimes you just bug her and or like shoot her a text. Let's do it now.
Bugging people though.
I know. Well, it comes with the territory. You can do it. and yeah, I'll help if I see her. I'll mention you.
Hell yeah! So we had our angel food cake. So now let's have the devil food cake. What is it like? What is it like mastering a song that you don't like? Something you just think is trash. It's like, oh, this is trash, dude.
You know,
like, what's it like?
People.
How often do you master something you don't like? Come on, yeah.
A popular question that gets asked is like, what is your like least favorite type of mastering session? And to be honest, I'm not even gonna like hide it. I hate vanity projects.
What do you mean?
Vanity projects is like when you're like when there's just so much money that is thrown into a project. Like, for example, it's like the daughter of like a banking CEO or something, like someone who has a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
money, and they put all that shit into like producing an album just because they could afford it. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
This is weird. And I've dealt with this even back in like when I was engineering in the Philippines. Just a lot of money, and they hire all the best composers, players, engineers, but it's like,
And they sound like shit on the record.
They sound like shit. The voice is like the person paying is the one singing. Like, of course, I'm not gonna name names, but anyone who's in the music, anyone in the music business knows what a vanity project is.
Heidi Montag.
Oh God, yeah. And like
Paris. No, actually, you know what? Paris Hilton's actually pretty good. So
yeah, it's like
she's actually an accomplished
DJ.
Yeah. Paris Hilton's actually legit. She's actually a legit DJ.
Oh, I'd love to
yeah. She's actually pretty good.
Oh, yeah. I believe that. I get that vibe from her. But it's like they hire all the best players, engineers, but then they're the ones singing, and like the whole production is just like there's no soul. It's like, okay, fine. Yeah. Well, at least it makes the money, but it's like there's just I have no joy in doing those engineering sessions. But yeah, that's one type of project that I'll do it, but yeah, it's just gonna take
I'm getting paid.
Yeah, this is the kind of session where like, fuck it, let's do it. I'm getting paid. We're gonna make, as long as they're happy, well, yeah, sign off. So
I hear you.
Another I'll tell you one hell scenario that I was in just recently. Well, not recently, but it was also during the pandemic. Actually no, before the pandemic. But I'm also not fond of like projects where they think they're the shit.
Lord.
And it's like their music is like they're God's gift to humanity, and you have to
God.
And they expect the world out of the session, and it also comes with the
I guarantee that's a lot of rappers. That's gotta be a lot of rappers.
Thankfully, I haven't dealt, like I master a lot of trap hip hop. I actually just did like a Latin trap hip hop album, which is amazing. I'll send it to you when it's out. But thankfully, haven't dealt with that. But this one is like a very you just know that they're all like high and smoking weed as they were like working on the music, and it's like very esoteric. Esoteric folk. I love folk. Like in another life, I'd love to be a mandolin player, but yeah, I digress. Yeah, it's like it's and the music's great, but then that comes with the lack of understanding and appreciation of mastering. Like they come in at mastering and they tell me what they want me to do, but it's not mastering. They want me to pan certain voices. It's like just someone who's like completely like out of touch with like, yeah, it's
they don't even know what it is they're asking for.
Yeah,
really.
But then when I told them that panning, it sounds like a mixing situation. This is not something that can be done at mastering. And then I try to be like very polite and realistic about it, but the response is just them threatening to shoot a gun.
Oh shit!
Yeah, this client threatened that he has a gun, and
oh shit!
Yeah, it was a weird situation. But yeah, not a fan of those sessions. Yeah, I'm not a fan of projects that are just lacking a grounded sense of reality on both sides, vanity and like, yeah. But
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what software do you use? Like, do you use like Pyramix or Sadie or something like that?
Are you a mastering engineer, Craig? Because you know too much about mastering that I wasn't expecting this.
I've worked with a lot of mastering engineers,
you should feature more mastering engineers.
I hope to. Yeah. Or do you just like
We'll
work
make
with
that
Pro
happen.
Tools.
So have you attended a mastering session, or most of these have been
I
remote?
have, yeah. I
What
have.
studios have you been to?
Sterling, yeah,
Oh wow, are you based in New
we
York?
did a session. No, this was when I took a trip to New York.
Oh,
They
that's
were,
amazing. That's
yeah,
part of
during a
the
trip.
trip.
Yeah, during a trip to New York. Now, Sterling was in New York at the time. They're
Yeah,
no longer in New York. They
they're in New
moved.
Jersey and Nashville now.
Hmm. And this was during the time they were in New York, and we attended a
That's the
mastering
best
session.
location.
Yeah, and I asked them, "What is that?" And they said, "This is Pyramix." I never heard of it, but like,
Pyramix
do
is a
you use?
popular DAW.
Yeah.
So in our studio, and a lot of mastering studios have two DAWs. The first is a playback DAW. That's where all the music gets played from. And what we use is Pro Tools for a playback DAW, but then the output of that DAW feeds into our analog console, and then it goes out of the analog console and into a mastering DAW. And what we use is Sadie. So
Sadie, okay,
Sadie
yeah.
is from this amazing British company called Prism Audio. And we've used them even when we were at the mastering lab with Doug. So big fan of Sadie, but I've worked with Soundblade, Wavelab. Those are other mastering DAWs that I'm familiar with. I've never used Pyramix, but I'd love to give it a try. I know Bob Ludwig from Gateway. They use Pyramix over there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So how do like plugins like Ozone, because Ozone is very popular in the production world. Like I use Ozone to put because I do my own little quick master to send to clients and stuff. And I use Ozone. Like, how does Ozone compare to the outboard gear on your console that you have? Or do you use Ozone as well? Because I know that Greg Calby sometimes uses Ozone.
So I do use Ozone from time to time. That's not my staple. But I found my preferred limiter is FabFilter, and I'm sure a lot of other engineers like that as well. Pro L2. It's not that like expensive or complicated. We also have like the TC Electronic, but I prefer Pro L2. And however, the one genre where Ozone just like wins all the time consistently against FabFilter is classical music and choral music. So I reach for that. It really is music dependent, but I always encourage Ozone is great because it really empowers producers to really get into mastering, and I really encourage artists to not be afraid of that task. And actually, I'm not sure if you know, but I'm a contributing writer for the Isotope Learn portal. So if you look up, if you search for Jett Galindo or any mastering articles, I've written about like 25 articles about mastering at the Isotope Learn portal. And in fact, for those who have like a monthly subscription for Isotope, has access to DLC that lets them learn how to master. So there's actually actual mastering exercises of projects that I have mastered. And it walks them through the process of mastering that song. And then they get to compare it with what has been approved. So it's a really cool mastering exercise. But yeah, that Ozone is great. The one thing that I feel is something musicians need to be mindful of when they use Ozone is there's too many features. And the one thing I like about analog outboard gear or like Pro L2 or TC Electronic is they're simple. Like they have one task and they do it amazingly. With Ozone, it's like
there's so many different tools in Ozone.
It's like the Google of mastering. It's like any tool you need, it's there. But the fact of the matter is you might just need one maximizer. You just need one EQ. And the point of mastering is restraint and subtlety. So I encourage you to just stick to one module at a time and learn it, because there are many cases where I've had trouble with certain settings on Ozone that just really collapses the music because of the wrong setting. So once you found your sweet spot, remember that and build off of that. So
yeah, with Ozone, there's a lot of things that I've never even used. So
exactly.
I mean, there's like a lot of modules that it's like, why would I ever need this? I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't have to.
Yeah, you ever heard of Hardball?
Hardball? Hardball? I don't know.
Hardball. Yeah, it's like a EQ that I've been using for 10 years. And it's what it does is that it'll analyze your music. It's like a spectrum analyzer. It'll analyze your whole song and you'll be able to like adjust the spectrum. It's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like Hardball, HAR-BAL.
Oh.
It was actually co-made, I guess it was co-designed by a mastering engineer out here in Atlanta named Earl Holder. And he like mastered Public Enemy and people like that. And he helped work on this software, and it's actually really good. It's actually something that I've used for a long time. So yeah, it's a lot of people haven't heard about it, but it is something
that's
I've used for a while, and it's actually pretty cool. So what are some of your favorite outboard processors when you're mastering? Like, what are your go-tos?
So this is an interesting question, particularly for us at the bakery, because if you ever visit our studio, and you should, if you're ever in LA, please let me know.
Oh my gosh, I would love to.
This is fun. But yeah, our studio is very unconventional compared to other mastering facilities. If you Google what a mastering studio looks like, you tend to have an impression of what a mastering facility looks like. But when you go in, the first thing that you'll see is that there's nothing between the mastering engineer and the speakers. So there's nothing between us. So it's just our chair, the engineer, and we just hear the music with nothing getting in the way. So where's the console? The console is actually behind us. So
wow.
Yeah, and it's the same layout that we've had since the mastering lab with Doug. We and mastering facilities tend to have like a simpler signal flow, signal chain compared to mixers and recording studios, and there's a reason for that, because like again, it's a very minimal production stage with a lot of restraint to really get your music to the finish line. There's not much that you need, but what you need, it has to be perfect. So our analog board is very simple. You have an EQ, you have your DAC. We have two types of...
What's a DAC? Yeah, explain that.
Digital to audio converter and audio to digital converter. So it converts all the bits that's coming out from your audio workstation to make sure that it comes out as like an audio signal, so that it feeds into the audio console, and then back to the mastering DAW. It passes through...
What kind of converter do y'all use, or does it depend on the song?
It really depends. For our signal chain, we have one specific DAC. It's called JCF Audio, and it's a boutique. Yeah, it's a boutique brand, but it's the same brand that's also used at the mastering lab in Capitol Studios, and it's built by this engineer Josh Florian, who also came from the mastering lab. So it's a very custom converter. We also our audio analog console also passes through two types of line amps. It just adds gain, but it imparts such a sound. So we have a tube line amp and a solid state line amp, and it's so clean, but they sound different. One is not necessarily better than the other, but it actually imparts such a sonic character to the music. And it's not about changing the sound, but like one line amp can behave differently depending on the music compared to the other. So if I have a choice on what my favorite outboard gear is, it's the amp. It's something that just adds level to our to the music. And yeah, if you ever come by the studio, the line amp alone, if you ever audition between the two, that's such a fun listening exercise to just listen to your music and see how it sounds if it passes through the solid state line amp or the tube line amp. But yeah, our workstation is very much a hybrid. So we have a digital set of plugins, but then our analog chain, even though it's simple, it's the heart of our sound. And it's the same, it's all the same line amp schematics of the same line amps that were used back at the mastering lab. And if something's not broken, you don't try to fix it. And it's been the tried and true line amps that we've used since Doug's been using it. So yeah, Doug Sachs is such a big influence to my sound now as a mastering engineer. However, I'm not sure if what your next question is, but I do want to say that my favorite digital plugin for mastering, I do have a favorite. And people will probably not expect it to be my favorite mastering plugin. It's RX.
Oh wow, RX.
Yeah, Isotope RX. It's not necessarily a mastering plugin, right? But it's kind of like my secret weapon, and I'm not afraid to like share it because
I've never heard of it before.
Look it up, Isotope RX. So it's from the same people who created Ozone, but RX is a noise. It's a noise treatment app plugin, but it's mainly used for classical music to just visually remove. It's easy to remove noise, like different kinds of extraneous noise from a recording. But it's also great for like very surgical mastering adjustments. That's for spot treatment, not spot treatment. But yeah, like because sometimes I find that I've nailed my mastering chain for the music, but there might be certain spots, like one or two spots where things are either distort or like the S just shoots out too much. But I don't want to compromise my signal chain just because of one or two little things. So rather than compromise the quality of the mastering chain, I just grab RX and spot like fix those two areas. And I feel that that's what really levels up my mastering is by using RX.
Favorite outboard EQ? Let's get to the expensive shit.
Well, if I were still at the mastering lab, my favorite outboard EQ would be the mastering lab EQs. And
wow, so they have their own. They have like their own proprietary ones.
Mastering lab was known for just using proprietary shit.
That's like Bernie Grunman Studios too.
Yeah, and it's funny because Bernie Grunman and Doug were like contemporaries of each other, and like even the Mastering Lab was even known for like a unique set of speakers. Having been around since 1967, it closed in 2015 when Doug passed away. But a lot of the sound comes from actual gear that's built by engineers in the studio. So the Mastering Lab analog EQs were my favorite. And the funny thing is, not a lot of people knew, but that analog EQ that we used were completely just shelf EQs, not even bell curves. So it took a lot of like discipline to learn how those work. But
they sounded good, didn't they?
It sounded amazing. And the thing is, if you just get because of the limitations, it also like sharpens your ear as an engineer, and you're able to like just get so much done because of the limitations. But right now at the bakery, so we don't have that EQ, but I'm a big fan of the Manley Massive Passive EQ.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm sure I'm not the first one.
Oh man, it is so good.
It is, and
It is
the
so
cool thing
good.
is, I've met some mixers who use the massive passive for like
Randy
really hard.
loves that one. Randy Merrill loves that
Oh,
one.
nice! That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love how transparent it is. If there's something that needs to be addressed, and it just does it without imparting like a character change, and I really I like it for like broad EQ shapes, and it just sounds smooth and transparent. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, you literally gave the same reason that Randy Merrill likes it.
Oh
Like
damn, I feel
just
good about myself.
wide EQ shapes, you know, you can just
Oh,
do a whole
nice.
lot in just a few turns, right? Cuz with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the plug-in EQs, you got to like just go wild with them before you can get anything out of them, but like those expensive ones, you can turn just a little thing and it'll just change your whole sound up. So we ask this question every episode, and I'm going to ask you. So what got you into mastering? How did you go from a little girl climbing trees in your backyard to becoming the great mastering engineer you are today?
Like I always say this when I get asked this. No kid ever says they want to be a mastering engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the one thing that's consistent among all mastering engineers is it's like it leads them to the path of being a mastering engineer. Like something in their journey led them to becoming a mastering engineer. And for me, all the way from Bumblefuck Philippines, sorry, um, uh, it it helps that my parents are musicians, and I've been exposed to like live music at home since I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna go into like great lengths detailing my journey, but they essentially, as much as they're supportive, they also didn't want me to pursue music.
Oh wow.
So they wanted me to have a real college degree, like any Asian parent would demand of their child. But
Sure.
as soon as I graduated college, I can do whatever the heck I want. So I was able. It was in college where I discovered that I wanted to be a sound engineer. So because I'm not a composer, but I love music and I love technology. And I also love performing. I'm a classical soprano. But I haven't been singing in a while anymore. But I used to travel internationally as part of a choral group.
Mm-hmm.
But I love music and technology, and sound engineering is like the perfect marriage of that. And I don't know of any other career path that made that happen. So when I graduated with a degree in psychology, that's when I decided that my life's going to be all about audio engineering from now on. And there's no audio engineering program in the Philippines. So I was able to find an internship in a training facility that taught multimedia production to priests and nuns.
Oh wow.
So I've been well versed with technology growing up since my dad was into that. So I did nonlinear video editing, graphics design, web design. You know those kids that are just starting to discover the Web 2.0, GeoCities, Angel Fire.
Yeah.
I was all into that when I was growing up. But I got into teaching. I just wanted to be immersed with technology as much as I could while I was still in the Philippines, and I was getting ready to study abroad and pursue audio engineering in the US. But luckily enough, that this training facility that taught priests and nuns have a recording studio because
Mm.
they also make like Catholic music in the Philippines. And I was able to train there. Started as an intern, almost didn't get the gig because the day before, the senior engineer found out that Jett Galindo was a woman.
Mm.
And too late for him to back off. But at that point, it's like I had to like prove to everyone there that I deserved to be there. And I eventually became the head engineer before I left for audio engineering studies in Berklee College of Music. And with my classical background as a choral singer, I've always in Berklee College of Music, when everyone had their bedroom studios, I had a mobile recording rig because I loved
Mm.
recording classical ensembles in acoustic concert halls. So I
That's
recorded.
amazing.
Yeah, that's I and I still love doing that to this day. Um, and my hobby is working on choral music, but doesn't get in the way of my mastering, which is like such a main love for myself too. But so yeah, I'm saying this because there was a job waiting for me before graduating to be a recording engineer for the Aspen Music Festival. It's a classical festival. So I thought my whole life moving forward is going to be in classical engineering. But I've always had this love for mastering on the side. And the mastering professor noticed that as I was in school. And when eventually down the road, mastering lab was searching for a mastering engineer to assist in the studio. And the professor from Berkeley reached out to me if I wanted to apply for that. So I packed my bags, left everything in New York. I used to be working in New York, but when I got the call to apply to be the next mastering assistant for Doug Sachs, I left everything in New York and just ended up moving to Ojai, which is like 5 hours away from Los Angeles. No, 2 hours away from Los Angeles. But I left everything to start fresh as a mastering engineer with Doug Sachs. And that was in 2013. And I still master today, because if you end up training under Doug Sachs, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So
absolutely.
that's it.
Yeah. Why are there so few women in this space? I don't understand it.
Well, just I guess I can be like candid. The thing is, there's a lot of women in this space. It's just that the big opportunities this is just from my observation and being in this business for so long. Like a lot of the opportunities that ends up making it to the Billboard Hot 100 rarely ends up being accessible to all these women. And I know a lot of women engineers, producers, players, instrumentalists, live engineers. But there's a recent, I've met all of them because of this organization called Sound Girls. And you should look it up. Sound Girls is this.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, it's the founder is Carrie Keys, who's a longtime live sound engineer of Pearl Jam. And through Sound Girls, I've met so many amazing, kick-ass women mastering engineers, including Piper Payne. I've met Maria Rice, who's half Filipino and is nominated for Grammy for archival restoration mastering. I've met women forensic audio engineers. There's so many. Like I've met the live sound engineer of Christian McBride, who's a woman. The thing is, we're everywhere, but the thing that really gets the biggest press tends to not be accessible to women. And
y'all are like getting the big opportunities.
Yeah, and this is I always like mentioning this, the USC Annenberg Study, and they have a very good a presence on Twitter. But every year USC funds a study on women diverse and not just for women, but just diversity and representation in general for the entertainment industry, both in music and film. But in music, the Billboard Hot 100, only 2% of the engineers and producers are women.
Wow.
Yeah, and this was just a study from last year. And the funny thing is, there was and it somehow didn't change from like the previous studies, but several years ago, the Recording Academy started a movement to encourage the people from the mainstream music industry to take a stand and make the effort to broaden their pool of hires to bring in more women. And there is a lot of people who signed in for that call to action to encourage more women, like women in the mix, hashtag women in the mix. And this was, I think, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But when
I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out like where are the big name female artists calling on their, I guess, labels to start bringing in more female engineers. Because I look at Taylor Swift, it's like, dude, Taylor Swift is like, all of the producers she's worked with have been men. Ariana Grande, and I love Ariana Grande, but like most of the producers that she's worked with have been men. These women have a lot of power.
Also, just let me add to that with what happened in the latest USC Annenberg study. So they did that research again. And the people and you're hoping that there would be a change based on like the recent call to action to bring in more women in the mix. But this year, the only change was there was like one out of all the people who signed on the call to action to bring in more women, only one person brought in a credit for a woman engineer, and it's Ariana Grande as herself.
As herself.
She engineered for herself. But the point is,
that's not giving opportunities to
exactly.
other women.
Like the other part of the argument here is that I wish the industry in general doesn't just expect the movement and the change to come from women. Like the fact that women made these decisions, have the call, have the shots, and like the fact that Ariana Grande produced for herself, credits herself for like operates Pro Tools and does all the multi-tracking of the vocal production herself is, I think, a statement. And I wish that we could bring in more women, but like at the end of the day, I think we can do better than put the pressure on the women who are like at the upper positions, because the call to change should not just come from women. And
yeah, but here's the thing though, okay? Yes, men have a certain degree of power, okay?
Yes, they do, not a certain degree. It's not a certain degree.
I mean,
have
obviously,
power.
right? Yeah, men have power. At the same time, though, a female artist like a Taylor Swift, who I always bring up for some reason, I have nothing against Taylor Swift, but like a female artist like Taylor Swift could really pluck anybody from like no existence at all and make them into a super producer. You know what I mean? And why haven't people like that? Because I mean, Taylor Swift could work with whoever she wants, and she worked like Halsey worked with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and it's like she went out of her way to bring those people on to work with her. It's like, okay, these are people who preach about like female solidarity and complain about how women are not represented at the Grammys, yet the only people they're working with are dudes.
I mean, I get it. At the end of the day, they're a woman surrounded by a team. And they might call the shots, but then they're also not the record label executive that is funding the project. There is a certain level of power, but again, it should not just fall on their hands.
I'm not saying it should just fall on their hands, but they should be doing more.
I know.
We all need to be doing more.
It's just so easy to fall into that trap of like, let's put the pressure on women, when the thing is there's a lot of women that are like at the top of mainstream charts that employ women, like her. Working with Jacqueline Sanchez, Alicia Keys, having a long time engineering partner with Ann Mincielli. So there is change, and then I have to give a shout out to Emily Lazar.
Yep.
When Emily got nominated for Album of the Year, for the first time, a lot of PR, a lot of press release were released, like promoting the fact that she was the first female mastering engineer to be nominated for a Grammy. That's not true.
Nope.
The more accurate wording is that she was the first in that category. But the fact of the matter is there was already a 3-time Grammy-winning mastering engineer and has been kicking butt in the best engineered surround category. And the wording of all these articles completely just the tone of that is very competitive. And the one reason too that I think adds to the conversation about why I really wish that the spotlight shouldn't be on like why are women not bringing in more women, because it promotes the feeling of like there's very few opportunities for women, and it's not like women bringing in more women kind of like doesn't address the fact that why are there very few seats for women at the table.
There's very few seats at the table. Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious where there are a few seats at the table. And if you just look at the credits for a lot of the major albums, it's the same engineers. It's like the same 5, 6, 7, 8 engineers that are mastering everybody's music.
Yeah.
And so, and it's all men. That's the thing. It's
a structure. It's a very structured business.
But what those guys need to do, like what that elite group of engineers need to do, is they need to start taking women under their wing. They need to start saying, okay, all right, let's say Serban or whoever says, yeah. And so like if Serban's getting all of these tracks to master, it's like he can say, hey, you know what? There's this great female mix engineer who I'm going to take under my wing and give some of these projects to. And that it's going to open the door for her. That's how Randy Merrill got on. Like Randy Merrill got on by working under Tom Coyne.
Exactly.
And that's how Randy Merrill ended up, when Tom Coyne passed away, Randy Merrill ended up taking over a lot of all those projects.
Exactly.
That's not happening for women.
I do want to mention, I think Chris Geringer's latest assistant is a woman, which is really cool. I also wanted to mention too that and this is something
Randy Merrill has also taken he took a woman under his wing too. So.
Awesome. And I know Randy's wife Aya Merrill is also a amazing mastering engineer. So I do want to mention this, and it's mostly because I've been reflecting on this. It's like a success for a mastering engineer doesn't necessarily mean that they're working on like Billboard Hot 100 releases. And I think for me, the fact that I'm working full time and paying the bills and really doing the thing that I love, I think is a success in itself. And maybe record labels will not be in the cards for mastering engineers, and that's okay. Like I'm not sure if you're familiar with this mastering engineer Hiba Kadri.
No,
but look her up, and hopefully, like maybe one of these days, I'll connect you guys. But Hiba Kadri is such an amazing, badass mastering engineer based in Brooklyn, and she is known for like mastering for Bjork, Anushka Shankar, but her biggest demographic, her biggest discography is all these amazing like indie artists in New York. Like the New York music scene is Hiba's sound. And it's like she's an amazing badass mastering engineer. And Bjork and Anushka Shankar reached out to her. And I know she's already mastered for Garbage recently. But she's like kicking butt and is like one of the biggest names in mastering, but she doesn't really do a lot of label work. But she's great at what she does. But like for me, like although I do label work for soundtracks, like we did Barbra Streisand and Elvis Costello was my recent gig. A big chunk of my work is video game soundtracks, and for me, I think it's badass to be known as like the video game mastering engineer. And there is no one goal as a mastering engineer. It's like you have to acknowledge that there's like the mainstream music is just a drop in the ocean of all the amazing music that's out there.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, Jett Galindo, this has been
it's
amazing.
a long one. Sorry if like I got heavy with like the topics of
this
like
has definitely been the longest
representation.
episode.
I'm
the
sorry,
longest
Craig.
episode today.
It was
No,
fun.
it's been amazing. I'm really glad that you took the time to do this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And you guys, if y'all want to check out Jett Galindo, if you want to work with Jett Galindo, how do you do that?
My first request is to not DM me on Instagram or social media, because I struggle with catching up on DMs, and really the best way to guarantee that we respond as quick as possible is by reaching out to booking@thebakery.la. You can also like reach us on our website, thebakery.la, and we'll make sure that we respond to you as soon as possible. But yeah, just from the website and from that email. No DMs. I'll try to respond, but DMs are hard.
All right. Awesome. So you guys definitely, if you want to have the best experience at getting your music mastered, go to the Bakery Mastering Studio in LA. Jett Galindo will take care of you. And I know that because she has done an amazing job on a lot of great music.
Oh, thank you, Craig.
I am Craig Reeves, and this has been the Studio Chatter Podcast, and we will see you next week for another episode.